This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Meat exports accelerated in 2021, and some of those gains might be here to stay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio, but Max had a chance to catch up with Dan Halstrom from the U.S. Meat Export Federation about that industry's growth over the past year. But before we talk about that, the export market has also been very kind to cotton. And Chad Colby had a chance to catch up with cotton growers in Alabama.
I've got a unique harvest report for me personally, my first ever conversation about cotton. The USDA reported that with great favorable weather conditions this last week, 75% of the U.S. crop has been harvested, a big jump from previous weeks. My travels took me west of Montgomery, Alabama, and as I saw harvest activities, you can imagine I just had to stop. I picked a great operation. Chad Pitts allowed me to jump up in the cab with him, and he did a great job answering the 50 questions I'm sure I asked about harvesting cotton. But I was curious about his year, and it didn't go without a fair amount of challenges. They actually had excessive moisture here late in the season that really put them behind. But as the USDA reported, favorable conditions here the last week have allowed them to catch up. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. With cotton trading well over $1 a pound, cotton producers have been excited about those exports. And as I mentioned, exports also contribute mightily to the prices of U.S. cattle and hogs. And Max had a chance to sit down with Dan Halstrom, the CEO and president of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, to talk about just how those exports have been performing.
The demand has been very resilient globally. We're on record pace this year, both beef and pork. And we're looking at 10 billion or more on the beef export side, which would be by far a record over 2018. And the pork side was a record last year, but we look like we're slightly ahead of last year's number. But exciting thing about what's going on is it's broad-based growth. It's not just one country. I mean, we're seeing growth in Japan, Korea, China on the beef side, but also Latin America, places like Central America, for example, a lot of growth there. So that's the exciting part.
Am I correct that sometimes our meat exports involve products that really we don't have a good, strong domestic market for, but they are certainly welcome in other countries?
Exactly. You hit right on it, Max. We don't ship a lot of middle meats overseas, for example. They stay here. But we ship a lot of rounds, we ship a lot of chuck rolls, a lot of short plates, and then the thing that people forget about, the variety meats. Of our 10 billion in beef exports this year, 1 billion of it will be beef variety meats, and we'll be near 1 billion on pork variety meats as well. So think something like a beef tongue is a delicacy in Japan. I don't remember the last time I had beef tongue here.
Yeah, I was a very young man.
Yeah.
I think I had it. Come to think about it. The one thing that we're seeing is not just the growth in volume, but also in value too, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, as we all know, the inputs going up, corn and soybeans, et cetera, fertilizer, you go right on down the list. The outputs have to go up as well. And the good news is, at least so far, the demand's been resilient and they're willing to pay the price. So that's a good thing, at least for the moment.
We got a reminder almost every hour of those ships that are parked out there waiting to deliver into the United States. And of course, that challenge, I'm sure, involves movement of product out of the U.S. What's happening there with our exports of meat? Are there areas of concern?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, all the momentum that we have on the outbound, the export side, this is a threat, a big threat, of getting our products out in a timely fashion. We have a shortage of containers that's well publicized. We have this backlog of ships. Long Beach, I think, was 50-some vessels. They're backlogged out there this morning. But it's beyond that. I mean, there's a shortage of truck drivers to truck the cargo. There's a shortage of chassis to load the containers on. There's a whole myriad of, it's very complex, this shipping situation. So the good news in all this is that we have a lot of awareness of the issue, especially the last 3 or 4 months. And we're starting to see some progress. Long Beach recently announced going to 24/7 hours, shipping hours versus abbreviated time frames. We're seeing some waivers on over-the-road weights for these containers, which will help move volume. But we have a long way to go. We have to stay focused on this issue because the sale's not complete till it gets to the customer wherever it might be around the world.
Thank you, Max. Dan also mentioned that trade agreements are crucial to securing access to these other countries. And now it's time to check in on the markets. Joining us this week to walk us through some of the things that are changing is Garrett Toy of Ag Trader Talk. Garrett, early on in the week, President Joe Biden announced he was going to be releasing some petroleum from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to combat oil prices. Is it going to make a substantial difference?
At this point, it looks like a buy the rumor, sell the fact, or vice versa kind of impact. We did have a 50 million barrel release of the SPRs this week. Actually, in reality, this has been a long time threat. But of that 50 million barrels, 32 of it's going to be replenished at a later date, which probably is going to come at a higher price. And 18 of that was already authorized through Congress, so it was an acceleration of that. So I think that what they were looking at is more of a coordinator effort. They've had China involved, India involved, Japan, the UK, multiple countries trying to release this. But I don't think it's going to really matter. I mean, we've had a sell the rumor, buy the fact kind of reaction to it. WTI was up 2% after the immediate release, or after the immediate announcement, I should say. And the fact of the matter is we're already at $10 a barrel off the recent highs. So, if you're looking at a technical trade, one could argue that we're due for a bottom at any point. So, I think if you look at the progression of this administration, I mean, we just had we just had a meeting with China last week. We discussed oil reserves at that meeting, asking China to release with us. They've been trying to talk to OPEC about increasing supplies. They even threatened of administrative action against oil companies, whether there was increased speculation. So we've had a lot of proverbial job owning of prices. And whether they can control these oil prices or not. I mean, fact of the matter is we're still recovering from the pandemic. Output is still constricted. And to get to the nuts and bolts of things if we're going to look at, constraining supply, the only way we're going to be able to satisfy that is opening up supply. And how do we do that is issuing more permits and allowing more drilling. And that goes against some of the more political beliefs of the administration, and there's going to be some internal conflict in order to get that accomplished.
Garrett, I've heard a lot of analysts look at crude oil and say they expect to see it between $70 and potentially $100 for the next year or so. Is that kind of where you fall?
I think that's a fair price. I mean, we still have strong demand, and I think ultimately, that lends to some favorable things for the energy markets, or for the grain markets, especially corn in the biofuels. But $70 to $100 seems to be the current talking points or price of ranges. I think given the overall state of the economy, you get much over 90. I think that you're going to start constraining economic development and start slowing the economy down. I mean, if the cure for high prices is high prices, this should be it. But it's the fact of the matter is we do need more permits being allowed in order to be able to allow more exploration and allow more drilling.
Absolutely. Garrett, let's talk. We just heard from Dan Halstrom, CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Meat exports were very strong this past year. Livestock prices, however, on the cattle side are still struggling. Let's talk about where you see the live cattle complex moving.
Well, I think things are still kind of trying to gravitate higher. I mean, more near term, I think this move in cattle this week is a little bit overdone. We had a pretty aggressive kill rate last week, and then we're into the holiday trade this week. So, that'll obviously offset that. But you look at the spreads, cattle markets gravitating higher. You look at hogs. I mean, we've had a pretty high severe widening of this Dec-Feb spread, and I think that the December is being pressured here by some heavier weights that we've seen. But it feels like this Feb hog market forward is trying to keep a balloon underwater here near term. It seems like it wants to get above that 200-day moving average and be supported.
All right, lots to talk about when we return with more from Garrett Toy. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. And we're back talking markets with Garrett Toy of Ag Trader Talk. Garrett, earlier this week on Monday, USDA announced that the corn harvest was 95% complete here in the United States. Where do you see the corn market going here, old crop wise, now that we've got it all out of the field?
You know, basis has been fairly strong throughout harvest, and now that harvest is essentially over, I think this is kind of where the games begin as far as basis is concerned. You know, the ethanol market is still has incredibly strong margins. The export market is kind of lagging here a little bit, but everybody is still undercovered, it seems. You know, so I think the basis games are really going to start accelerating here as far as who's really got coverage and who doesn't have coverage now that the farmers' bins or the bin doors are essentially locked. You know, you've got the games here. I think, you know, anything that's, you know, there's only 30 days left in the month, but, you know, everything's getting deferred income into January. So, I mean, basically it's going to be 30 days worth of needs here that need to get covered, because I do think that after the first year, you're going to see an accelerated movement just because of deferred tax incomes or deferred tax gains. But I think that keeps spreads narrow here, and flat price really, I mean, we still have the inflationary elements out here, but, you know, corn market, the corn chart looks good. We're due for a breakout here. We're kind of coiling here and seeing these ranges starting to narrow. We have this breakout about 585 area, which would push us into, you know, the summer highs, or we see a move back towards that 550 area. Given margins, though, I mean, I think that with a break to 550, the end users will be all over that kind of movement. And you've got ethanol margins that are at all-time highs. You've got front-end ethanol that's trading over $3, and that inverse is kind of is largely logistic related. But still, you've got ethanol margins through first quarter 2022 that are something we haven't seen in quite some time. So that should keep basis strong into the first of the year.
Let's talk about soybeans. Also 95% harvested. Soybean export demand has been strong. We've been seeing a lot of announcements. Garrett, where do you see soybean pricing moving from here as we go through the end of the year?
You know, the market, you know, it goes back to that November crop report, and the December crop report has no production estimates to it, no production element to it. But the interesting thing is you know, the Western Corn Belt is essentially done with soybean harvest. The Eastern Corn Belt still lagging and still showing issues that the wetness in the East is hindering harvest. And that was largely, I think, the culprit that caught most people in that November crop report is looking for a higher yield increase. Is that the heavy rains across Indiana and Ohio negated that, and the fact that we still have a lot of beans in the Eastern Corn Belt that need to be harvested. I do think there might be some risk that this could lead to a yield surprise in the January crop report. As far as the demand side of things, though, we really need to see these bean exports pick up, and unfortunately, I think, you know, we're at the point in the calendar where I just don't think that's going to happen. You know, we've got South American FOB offers, you know, all the way between now and February with a new crop. South America just keeps continuing to find more beans, and they're cheaper with us out here. I just don't think that we're going to be able to meet the USDA's forecast. So the onus is going to be on the exporter here to be able to try to find these extra exports, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Don't think it's going to happen, but oil demand looks like it's going to stay strong, Garrett.
Absolutely. And even meal demand. I mean, you know, read an article here a week, 10 days ago, talking about how, you know, just general supply constraints, you know, the cost in supply of lysine are going to increase meal rations, meal in the rations. So that means that, you know, the meal demand also looks decent, but oil demand is definitely the leader.
Lots of things to keep an eye on. Garrett Toy from Ag Trader Talk. We appreciate him taking the time to talk to us this week.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
With Thanksgiving in the rearview mirror, now it's time to think about Christmas. Chad Colby is coming to us with some new ideas that might look very good underneath the Christmas tree.
Are you in the market for some new tools on your farm or ranch? If so, you're going to love this tech segment. This is a socket set I recently purchased from Milwaukee. Now, what I like about it, first of all, is the obvious. The sizes are really big, so we can all read it. But the other thing is, it's great to have everything in its own place. This set's got metric and standard, deep well. It works really good. My challenge had been is my cordless 3/8 impact, honestly, wasn't really strong enough to do a lot of good. And Milwaukee has got a really nice, they call it mid-torque 3/8 impact. And what I mean by that is it's got 600 foot-pounds of torque, which is a lot in this size of a tool. The other thing it has is it's got some automation built in. They call it drive control. And that little button you see me pushing right there lets you set that tool for what you want. It's got a couple settings that are really neat. It's called bolt removal, which gives you maximum effort in reverse. It's also got a lightweight mode too that's really great. Now, over the last several years on This Week in Agribusiness around the holiday season, we've featured some gift ideas. And coming up next week, Max and I in the studio are going to talk about some of those. One of them being some great new products to help you make your tractors, pickup trucks, semis shine like never before. Maybe you've got an old hood you want to bring back to color. We'll help you with that. We'll share some new products from our friends at Octane Press. They've got the new John Deere Evolution book, and you can bet there's a few more things we're going to show there as well, as Lee does a great job. Of course, you know me, we're going to have to talk about the latest in drones. We'll give you some ideas there. And a big thing now through Monday is Apple has their annual Black Friday deals. And if you're in the market for anything Apple, iPads, watches, phones, this is the best time of year to buy it. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. And Chad wanted me to mention that socket set is going to run you about $120, and that Milwaukee driver, that's going to be about $200 to get it underneath the Christmas tree. And with the holidays approaching, it's time to think about giving back to others. And the folks at Whiffles have been doing that for several years. That story later in the program. '21 was a strong year for grain exports, and I had a chance to sit with Ryan LeGrand, the president and CEO of the U.S. Grains Council, to talk about just what milestones were hit in the last year.
We're coming off a record year for corn exports. We exported nearly 70 million tons of corn. A lot of that was driven by China. China came in and imported around 21 million metric tons, and no country's ever reached that level. You know, you look at Mexico, Japan, the most they've ever gotten to was 16 to 17 million. So it's been a great year.
It has been a great year, and that begs the question, will China stay in this market in 2022?
The fundamental demand says yes, but the fact that they've really filled the reserves up to levels I think they're comfortable with tells us that we're not going to see another 21 million ton year out of China. They have 12 million tons on the books right now, though, for the current crop, so it's a heck of a start.
It certainly is. Ryan, I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about a metric you use, which is the grain in all forms? Can you talk about how that works and how you calculate it?
Right, so, you know, in talking with people that want to hear about exports, it's easy for us to talk about the corn, barley, sorghum that we market directly overseas. But if you want to look a more holistic look of how much corn, how much distillers grains are going out of the country in all forms, we have to include meat. We have to include the meat that consumes, or the animals that consume this product right there in the United States. So when you throw in beef, pork, and poultry on top of the products that we traditionally market, just for tracking purposes, right? We're not out there promoting these other products, but all of that together does give us a clearer picture of exactly how much corn's leaving our borders.
And when you look at that big picture, the grain in all forms picture, Ryan, 2021, another banner year?
Again, another record year, up I think at 28% around there. China drove a lot of that. But Mexico and Japan contribute very heavily to those totals as well.
Well, and when we think about our big corn purchasers, obviously China, Mexico, Canada, South Korea, who are some of the other big players that you're keeping an eye on as growth opportunities in 2022?
Well, you know, Japan is always there in the top 5 as well. Korea is there too. But Vietnam is one that's going to be very interesting going forward. You know, they just dropped their tariff for U.S. corn from 5% to 2%. And doesn't sound like a lot, but in the cutthroat world of corn trading, that is a lot, and it'll make or break most deals. Yeah.
So what are you watching for opportunities in Vietnam? Is it animal agriculture picking up in that country that could drive demand?
It's animal agriculture, it's growth in their pork production, it's a rebound from ASF problems that they've had, and it's also their people coming into the middle class, rising out of poverty. Maybe they can afford pork once or twice a week, where before they couldn't. That affects demand.
It certainly does. It's the same dynamic we saw play out in China over the past 15 years, now repeating itself in Vietnam. Any other places in Asia, Southeast Asia particularly, that you're watching for opportunities?
Indonesia is always one to keep an eye on. There's great potential there, we think, for lots of distillers' grains are going there, but ethanol is very important to get into that market too. But Southeast Asia as a whole is just a real economic driver for that region, and there's just a lot of demand there. Thailand fell out of the top 5, but last year, you go back one full year, 3 out of the top 5 distillers' grains importers were found in Southeast Asia.
But there's another big distillers' grains purchaser just south of the border, right, in Mexico?
Mexico, that's right. They just broke their own record for distillers' grains imports from the United States, 2.1 million metric tons. It's very impressive to see.
It is. Now, when we think about exporting grain, we're dealing with that international supply chain. Ryan, we've been seeing lots of headlines about that over the past 6 months. Have these supply chain bottlenecks impacted grain exports much at all yet?
Well, not on the corn and sorghum side. A lot of that goes in bulk. Don't see a lot of containers going out with those products in them. Distillers' grains is where we've been affected, and we're really keeping an eye on it. We'd like to see a resolution soon because we ship to so many destinations in containers with distillers' grains.
Interesting. So that's where the bottleneck gets noticed in the grain export chain. When we think about working with all of these countries around the world, obviously diplomacy and politics plays a part. Ryan, when you look around for American competitiveness on the international scene right now, are there any big agreements or deals being negotiated that could impact the flow of grain in 2022?
Well, the current administration has said that they're not all that interested in pursuing new agreements, at least in the short term. They're more focused on enforcing existing agreements. We would like to see a little bit more of a focus on new agreements because over 50% of the export of grains in all forms go to free trade agreement partners. So the numbers are right there. The more free trade agreement partners we have, the more grains in all forms we're going to export. So we're extremely supportive of looking for new agreements, specifically in Southeast Asia. There's a UK agreement that was out there with the Trump administration that's not finished. There's a Kenya agreement that was being talked about. We would love to see the Biden administration go out and explore new agreements.
You mentioned Kenya. We've talked a lot about Southeast Asia. It has certainly been a hotspot for some time, but as people look down the road 5 or 10 years, I hear more talk about Africa. Do you see opportunity for U.S. corn in that continent?
We really have our eyes on the horizon when it comes to Africa. We think that the future is there. It may not be 10 years. It may be a 20 to 30 year type operation, but we got started in China in 1980. We got started in Mexico in 1979. These things take time, and we're in it for the long haul. We think Kenya shows great promise in sorghum, potentially distillers' grains right now. So we're active in the country and would love to see an agreement there.
Thanks to Ryan LeGrand, the president and CEO of the U.S. Grains Council. There will be more to come when This Week in Agribusiness returns.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness, and thanks for taking the time to join us. Recently, Max had a chance to sit down with Mark Stock, the CEO of Big Iron Auctions, and they were talking about farmland sales. Mark mentioned that a lot of the high prices being paid for farm ground is because it's more than farmers coming in to do the bidding.
We've sold some land in Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas just in the last couple of weeks. And the most interesting thing about it, Max, was it was all sold to investors. In most cases, the second last bidder was also an investor. So we're seeing a lot more money get thrown into the land buying pot, and they don't seem to be running short anytime soon.
Do you know anything about the profile of those investors? Are they large corporate funds? Are they individuals who just want to broaden their portfolio? How would you describe these folks and what you know about them?
The majority of them are folks that have individuals. I think they're taking their money out of their 401ks once they hit their 59.5, and they're rolling it into something that gets them a better return than investing it in the stock market, which is somewhat risky at that age group, and they're feeling more comfortable in land, and they're also concerned about the appreciation, or they want that appreciation from all of the things we're hearing about the economy.
The non-farm investor doesn't have that emotional connection quite with the land or its use. And is this a good thing? I mean, how do you view that? As these folks come in from the outside to buy in the countryside?
Well, from what we're seeing, Max, is the folks that are buying land have ties to that specific area. They may have
They have moved away for a while, for example?
Yes, and they have a cousin or a nephew that is farming in that area, and in many cases they're renting that ground out to their relation. So that is somewhat comforting, and you know, it's an open market when we sell land on our unreserved online auction platform. But it's nice when they tie it back to their roots, because you know, I'm a farmer at heart as well.
I have to ask you about the energy push and the move to put solar farms in many areas that have not had them, and of course the wind farms continue their development. Is that having an effect at all in any way on the land transactions?
I think people are paying attention to that, but I think the carbon credit thing that might be coming into play sooner than later is probably going to increase more people for buying and investing in land, because the leases that we do, because we have a management division, we're adding terminology in there that the landowner retains those carbon credit rights. So if you have a company that wants to pay X amount of dollars for that carbon that's produced off that farm, that also helps that investor with their return.
And as Mark reports here every week, prices for equipment have stayed very strong as well. Growers who bought equipment in 2014 are now saying they can sell it for roughly the same money.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Let's talk weather. Greg Solier is here. And Greg, looking at the drought monitor in that Pacific Northwest, the far west seems to be getting some rain. Anything moving east?
Yeah, they've had, some improvement. Matter of fact, the past week to 10 days, almost too much of it. There had been reports of some river flooding and swollen streams and rivers into the westernmost areas of Washington State, far western Oregon as well. The systems continue to move on through, much weaker, and the last of these cold air prods, by the way, and through Big Sky Country of the Northern Plains. How about some of those December-like single digits last week? And the cold is more seasonal here, and you see an absence of anything organized in the moisture department. We see a warm front on the move. There it goes up across the Canadian prairie onto the plains. These downslope Chinook winds come back into play. No snow cover here, so that means a big warm up, maybe a couple of snowflakes on the front side of the warmer air, and it is dry time across the Intermountain West, and maybe a stray shower Northern California, Oregon, Western Washington State. These are weak weather systems this week, but still very wet here. You get to the Cascades on east, little or no drought improvement, and you can see it in the testimony to some of those dry topsoils, some 95% short and very short, for example, in through Big Sky Country. There's a little renegade system under the main steering currents here, dribbling into parts of the desert Southwest, New Mexico, out through the Rio Grande. Otherwise, warm, dry, plenty of opportunity for outdoor work. They're wrapping up cotton harvest ahead of schedule, by the way, into the valleys of California. There's still a bit of a seasonal chill across sections of Nebraska, but here comes that warm front and the southwest to northeast upper level wind flow, sinking air, compressional warming, 50s, 60s, 70s back in the plains. Great for outdoor work, Mike. Not great with fast evaporation, drying and blowing around in the dust and sand out there with drought in mind.
That's true, but in the central part of the country, Greg, is that warm weather going to stick around all week?
It will eventually get there, coming off that winter feel that we had, and there are a couple little systems migrating out of the western Corn Corn Belt into the Mississippi Valley. A couple of flakes of snow, sprinkles of rain, and a brief shot of some cold air through the northern plains. Again, here comes that warm front. Here it is, these half-hatched circles here, and it's into a broad low-level south wind, upper levels winds in from the west and southwest, and it will be a feel of early fall instead of wintertime throughout much of the heartland. Maybe a little moisture up towards the Sioux, and that is it. Plenty of opportunity to put a wrap on things. Harvest-wise, even in the eastern Corn Belt, worsening drought, western complex it into the Plain States areas. Here's that weather system through the Rio Grande, the desert southwest. Again, pretty quiet weather picture expected across areas of the Delta, lower Mississippi Valley. They're wrapping up peanut harvest, cotton harvest, etc. down there over the cotton belt, by the way. And there's little, if any, organized moisture expected for maybe a couple of sprinkles of rain in the Rio Grande. Windy, warm weather into the heart of the drought areas, and the moderating trend in temperatures as well later in the week from the Mississippi on eastward.
Well, looking farther eastward, Greg, are we going to continue to see a dry down?
We will with time. Still some of this lake-induced moisture, these prods of cold air that have sucked on in. One more little system here, and there is still some propensity for lake effect moisture to Michigan, parts of Indiana, Ohio, and the lower lakes region. So a little more early winter feel here, but as the week wears on, big improvement. Here comes that warm front racing on by into the St. Lawrence River Valley later in the week. A little warm frontal moisture here. Windy, warmer, drier opportunities to put a wrap on corn harvest where we still need to wrap it up in pockets, Michigan, Indiana, and in through Ohio. Southeastern states, yeah, a little more frost and freeze with the center of high pressure across the Tennessee Valley, mid-Atlantic region as we move through the early portions of the week. Later into the week, this boundary moves to the north. A couple of showers off the Atlantic side down through central and south Florida. A couple of drops of rain, Texas. Otherwise, the southeast, high and dry.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Let's take a look at the precipitation, Greg, over this next week. What do you expect to see and where?
Not much, and really focused in probably one or two areas, perhaps a little upslope into parts of Big Sky country, the Divide country. That's it, and it's spotty at best. Maybe here in the southwestern sections of the country, moisture amounts are down into the Pacific Northwest. Again, we continue to see a re-establishment, strengthening, if you will, the drought pattern here with time here and here. There may be some late week moisture over the southeastern part of the country and some spotty quarter to half inch downwind to the Great Lakes region. Otherwise, it is a very quiet and moisture-free weather pattern this week, Mike, across much of the country.
Well, Greg, the week of December 6th, you mentioned we're going to have this warm spell stick around. What does it look like that week?
Yeah, that warm front, that change of the steering currents, and for winter time, boy, I tell you, if it were summer, 105-degree heat across the plains, but it is not. We're quickly approaching the solstice, so maybe some records to be set here. The cold air, and it's not much to speak of, retreating out of the northeast into New England and a sliver up and down sections of the west coast. Moisture-wise, not much to speak of, except it is a trademark of La Nina, far northern California, more so to the Pacific Northwest. So some good news here, but it's already wet parts of Washington state. And this is good to wrap field work. Not great with drought, but it is what it is. A little moisture into the northeast to New England and still stuck down through parts of Texas and western parts of the Gulf Coast. A couple of spells of moisture there.
Greg, the week of December 13th, does that much above temperature area stay in place?
It stays in place, so if you still need to get Santa Claus plugged in and the star lit up on the barn, here is your window of opportunity again, or just to call it a season. Now, there's not a lot of frost or freeze going into the ground, so you have to kind of calculate maybe do I go out there with heavy equipment. You got rut issues down the line with time, but anyway, warmth here below over the southeastern part of the country and the Pacific West, and moisture, not much to speak of except some good news here, but there will be a propensity for maybe too much beginning to build in the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of wet weather down through the Gulf Coast area, high and dry across much of the heartland into the Northeast and New England.
Greg, week of December 20th, we've got the solstice and we've got Christmas. How does it look?
Finally, we get to see a pattern shift here, and it will be pretty pronounced and a shockaroo to the system as we finally break down those strong winds across the Gulf of Alaska, allowing for some much colder air to begin to penetrate southward. This will be settling southward the rest of the month of December, January, and beyond. Look at the warmth, though, and anytime you get the compaction here of the isotherms or the air masses, you pick up moisture, and it's going to be probably a stormy weather picture up approaching Christmas and beyond, still going on Pacific Northwest. Here comes the snows. Canadian Prairie, Northern Plains, much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt into the Mid-Atlantic region, dry across areas of the Southwest, a little more moisture down south towards the Rio Grande Valley. Plan accordingly up to the north.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
At the American Tractor Museum, they have added to their fleet of unusual tractors, and the two I'm sharing with you this week certainly fall into that category. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. It's the best tool cabinet you'll ever buy, they proudly proclaim. You might want to give a hint to Santa about a Store Lock cabinet. It wouldn't fit under the tree, but what a great holiday gift that would be. Well, if you were at the Half Century of Progress this past summer, you saw this thing. What in the world is it? That was the common question being asked there about this John Deere. It's a John Deere 430C, and the previous owner, Chicago area businessman Randy Yockey, said that little 430 used to harvest small trees was probably a little underpowered for the task, but that didn't keep him from enjoying ownership of that unique tractor over the years. Well, thanks to the folks at Meekum Gone Farmin', Randy has transferred that 430C to a new owner, the American Tractor Museum, Perryville, Missouri. And what a perfect addition, I'd say, to their lineup of what you call orphans and oddballs. Then there's this. As a man in Germany, well, he grew up in Germany. He's been living in the United States, but this Hanomag tractor has been with him through his entire life. And Al brought that to the Meekum Gone Farmin' auction. He consigned it there for the auction. He grew up with the tractor, took it with him everywhere he moved in the United States. And now we'll know exactly where it will be, lovingly cared for at the American Tractor Museum in Perryville, Missouri.
Max, check out December the 1st on BigIron.com. Stephen Schultz is retiring from Whittemore, Iowa. He's got a gold key John Deere 8260R mechanical front tractor, only 1,245 hours. He's got a one-owner 2013 Freightliner Columbia glider kit semi-truck tractor. It's a day cab. He's got a 2008 Case 7010 combine with only 1,489 separator hours. He also has a 2019 Dodge Ram 2500 four-wheel drive pickup, only 4,400 actual miles. He's got quality grain train wagons and a Drago cornhead. Super sharp equipment selling in Whittemore, Iowa for Stephen Schultz. Also selling, Max, is the Kenneth Boswell Retirement Equipment located by Shickley, Nebraska. They've got a New Holland CR 9060 combine. They've got a J&M 750 18 grain cart with a scale. Check out their international COF 9670 quad axle grain truck that will sell on their retirement sale. We'll also be conducting the Donald D. Strube Estate Sale by Plattsmouth, Nebraska. They've got 8 John Deere collector tractors, plus 2012 John Deere 3038E compact utility tractor with a loader. It's only got 211 hours. All of this equipment sells to the highest bidder on December the 1st. Go to the BigIron.com website for all the details.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide, we stand for you.
Well, on This Week in Agribusiness, we enjoy saluting the FFA, and lately we've been getting to know the national officer team. Joining us this week is the newly elected president, Cole Berlacher. Cole, thanks for taking the time to join us, and what are you excited about in this year to come?
One of the things that I'm most excited about this next year is getting the opportunity to connect with members from all across our country and in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. FFA is a very unique organization in the sense that at the chapter grassroots level, there's a lot of different traditions that take place, and each chapter does those traditions a little differently. And so getting out there into our country and into those Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands and get to experience those traditions is something that I'm very excited about, and hear a little bit more about the stories of our members and how they're perceiving agriculture and experiencing it in their FFA experience.
Well, Cole, let's get a little bit of your story as an FFA member. What was it that prompted you to join FFA those years ago?
Yeah, I would have to say my family was a huge factor in me joining and getting involved in FFA. I have an Uncle Nathan and an Aunt Jessica who are both ag teachers, and they've been a huge influential force in my life and have always encouraged me to pursue my passions, whatever it may be. And luckily it kind of aligned with theirs, and agriculture and FFA has been a huge passion of mine. And so to have a support like that, to always encourage me and push me to be active and stay involved, definitely is what got me involved in FFA. Additionally, I'm really close to my grandparents. I joke I'm the honor middle child. And so when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time on my grandparents' farm and just developing that love and that passion for the production industry and getting to see it take place around me. And that was another big thing. I knew I wanted to be a part of agriculture and our industry. I just wasn't sure what that was going to look like. And so FFA was really that place where I found a home.
That's fantastic, Cole. And after you finish your year of service, you're going to become an ag educator. At least that's your major. And we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
For my Thanksgiving message this year, I'd like to go back a year and quote excerpts from what Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue had to say about this American holiday. This is what Americans do when times are tough. We adapt and we overcome. The same thing is happening with truck drivers, food processors, grocery store workers, and others in the food supply chain. The pandemic has opened our eyes to where our food comes from, and we are blessed in this country to be food independent, thanks to our farmers, year after year. So when you sit at your Thanksgiving table this year, remember these words. When you take a slice of turkey, a scoop of sweet potatoes, a piece of pumpkin pie, and a serving of cranberry sauce, remember the families who worked the land for your meal. The sweet potatoes on the table most likely came from North Carolina. The pumpkin in your pie probably grown in the #1 state for pumpkin production, the land of Lincoln, Illinois. Your cranberries most likely came from a cranberry bog in Wisconsin. And finally, your turkey likely raised in Minnesota, the largest producer of turkeys in the country. So when you sit down to that Thanksgiving dinner table, remember this. Be thankful for the harvest and show gratitude to the American farmers, the essential workers, and the service members who will not be with their families this Thanksgiving. A blessed Thanksgiving to you. Be safe, be well. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
We're in the season when a lot of folks think of giving a lift to those who could use the help. And it's the third year for a seed company finding a way to give some assistance to military veterans. Wiffles Hybrids has been serving those who serve, and Jill Lohr told us about it.
And it really got started because we have a very service-oriented mindset. We love to serve our corn growers, help them be more profitable with growing their crops, but we're also just love to serve our communities. And we kind of wanted to take that to the next step and have an opportunity for corn growers and other people in the Central Corn Belt to participate. So we started Serving Those Who Serve, the initiative, and that benefits Homes for Our Troops. So that's an initiative that we're really proud of, and like I said, going into our third year and can't wait for it.
How did the mechanics of that program work? There was a
Sure.
portion of a certain variety that was
Correct.
channeled toward
Correct.
the Homes for Troops?
So our first year we had one hybrid dedicated, and then so for the second and now into the third year, we're gonna have two dedicated Serving Those Who Serve hybrids. They come in a lovely camouflage bag or a camouflage plaqued fast fill box, depending on how much you ordered. And so yeah, growers can participate just by simply purchasing a Serving Those Who Serve hybrid, and $1 from each bag sold goes to Serving Those Who Serve, ultimately Homes for Our Troops. And then for anyone that wants to participate, we also have Serving Those Who Serve merchandise. So you can purchase a hat or a t-shirt, and the proceeds from that goes to Serving Those Who Serve and homes for our troops.
Can that be done through the Wiffles website? Is that how
Correct.
it works?
You can go to wiffles.com/STWS, serving those who serve, to find the merchandise and also more information about the hybrids and the home builds that we've been able to participate in.
Was there one just recently that you helped with? I thought
Correct.
I saw a photograph somewhere online that you
Correct.
were in attendance.
So about a month ago, we were up for Volunteer Day. So that was the step, that's the next step to them getting their home. And so up in Wisconsin, just outside of the Milwaukee area, Bobby McCardle and his family will receive their home on December 11th. We'll be there for the key ceremony, and they'll be home in time for the holidays, which is fantastic. Bobby's actually one of the first veterans that we were able to meet through Homes for Our Troops. He helped us launch the Serving Those Who Serve initiative. So this has been a long time coming. He's had to wait for a lot of land. The land fell through a couple times, so we are just so excited for Bobby and his family to finally get their home. He was there on Volunteer Day, his wife was there, his kids were there, so it was just a fantastic opportunity to be around him and see their excitement. So we can't wait to welcome him home in December.
Thank you, Max. And it should be noted, these Homes for Our Heroes are designed specifically for injured post-9/11 military veterans. So thank you to Wiffles. And thanks to all of you for tuning in this week. All of us here at This Week in Agribusiness hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving, had the chance to sit back, reflect on some of the gifts we've been given. We hope to see you next week, same time, same place, right here.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.